An unprecedented crime. The Chinese Communist Party has been extracting organs from prisoners of conscience to sell in hospitals, usually killing the victims. The biggest target is Falun Gong, a spiritual meditation practice heavily persecuted by the regime. Earlier, NTD's Steve Lance spoke with Senator Ted Cruz about his bill to sanction this crime.
Senator Ted Cruz, thanks so much for taking a moment.
Good to be with you.
You've introduced the Falun Gong Protection Act to the Senate. This would be the first of its kind bill if passed. What type of message do you think it would send to the Chinese Communist Party if it does pass, and what does the bill actually do?
Well, listen, the Chinese Communist Party engages in murder, it engages in torture, it runs concentration camps, it persecutes dissidents. With the Falun Gong, they're a religious minority who are targeted, they are rounded up, and they're subject to horrific practices, including organ harvesting. They literally capture practitioners of Falun Gong, they remove their organs, and then they provide them either to transplant to other Chinese nationals, or they also find them the organs on the black market to be trafficked overseas. It is a grotesque and utterly inhumane practice. And this law, very simply, would impose sanctions on anyone engaged in organ harvesting of the Falun Gong. And it's a simple, common sense proposition. My legislation passed the House by voice vote, without a single recorded objection. That's a very positive sign. We need to move it through the Senate. It hasn't moved yet, but I'm going to keep pressing it. And we need to speak with one clear voice against the evil that is perpetrated by the Chinese Communist Party.
Senator, to your point, the crime of forced live organ harvesting, it's not done by a rogue person.
Yeah.
This is state-run by the government. And your state of Texas has been at the forefront of legislation, particularly when it comes to these types of organ harvesting practices.
Listen, I have been for 13 years in the Senate leading the fight to stand up to the atrocities of the Chinese Communist government. And, you know, when I first arrived in the Senate, elected in 2012, I said at the time that China poses the single greatest geopolitical threat to the United States over the next century. And I think we need a comprehensive strategy, very much like Ronald Reagan had during the Cold War to take on the Soviet Union. We need the same sort of comprehensive strategy to take on communist China. Now, I got to tell you, in 2012, 2013, 2014, I was a very lonely voice up here. Virtually every Democrat disagreed with me. And most of the Republicans disagreed with me. They looked at China and they saw nothing but dollar signs as far as the eye could see. I do think a lot of people's eyes are opening up. And just like Ronald Reagan, you go back to the Cold War, there is power in clarity. You know, I was 10 when Reagan became president. I remember he came in and he referred to the Soviet Union as an evil empire. He said Marxism, Leninism will end up on the ash heap of history. He said, when asked, what's your strategy in the Cold War, he said, very simple, we win, they lose. And most notably, he stood before the Brandenburg Gate and he said, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. Ronald Reagan and America won the Cold War without firing a shot. We need that same clear resolve, and an important part of it is calling out their horrific atrocities and human rights abuses, and the fact that you have a government of a nation that purports to be a civilized nation, that is a permanent member of the Security Council of the United Nations, that is involved in every international organization. They ought to bow their heads in shame as long as they're carrying out practices like forced organ harvesting. So there is power in sunlight and truth for exposing their evil practices, and I'm going to keep fighting to do that as I have for 13 years.
Senator, talk to us about the transnational criminal element to the Chinese Communist Party when they expand their reach into the United States to manipulate our institutions, our media. What can be done to stop that? So
the Chinese Communist Party engages in propaganda. It engages in espionage. It has active spy networks in the United States, active spy networks against Chinese Americans, active spy networks against Taiwanese Americans, active spy networks against Americans writ large. You look at one of the very first pieces of legislation I ever passed into law was legislation dealing with Confucius Institutes. So Confucius Institutes are on college campuses in America. They are paid for and controlled by the Chinese Communist Party, and they are pits of both espionage and propaganda. and I drafted legislation that would cut off funding from the U.S. Department of Defense to a university that allowed a Confucius Institute to be operational on its campus. As a result of my legislation, which got bipartisan support, we have seen dozens of Confucius Institutes shut down. It is very much transnational. You look at something like intellectual property theft. Look, theft and IP theft has been around from the dawn of time. The first guy who invented the wheel, somebody probably stole the idea and made wheels for his buddies. But there's a difference. We have never before seen a nation state with trillions of dollars of resources and an economy behind it use the theft of intellectual property as a state policy. Listen, when it comes to communists, my father's from Cuba. My father was imprisoned and tortured in Cuba. My aunt, my Tia Sonia, was imprisoned and tortured by Fidel Castro's goons. So I have to tell you, when it comes to communists, I hate communists. It is personal. It is visceral. I believe communism is the most evil ideology mankind has ever produced, and the Chinese Communist Party is an evil organization. And I think we need American leadership to stand up and shine a light to stop their espionage, to stop their propaganda, to stop their theft of intellectual property, to stop their murder, their torture. There are over 1 million Uyghurs in concentration camps right now in China. And China should not be treated as a member of civilized society as long as they're engaging in vast and horrific oppression of its own people.
Senator Ted Cruz, really appreciate it.
Thank you.